On 31st August 1980, some members of the British military, under Operation Courage, crossed the English Channel by parachute. This was the first time that halo skydiving had ever been done. The shortest distance across the English Channel is 21 miles, and that parachute descent put them into the Guinness Book of Records. The MOD, the Ministry of Defence, was informed. The British Consulate in France was informed. However, the French police were not. An altitude chamber was put at the team's disposal for them to experience the effects of high altitude and hypoxia under the watchful eyes of the Aviation Medical Department at RAE Farnborough, whose chief trainer was Wing Commander Chris Sharples. This chamber is used during aerospace or high altitude research or training to simulate the effects of high altitude on the human body, especially hypoxia. Additionally, the team all had to undergo the effects of G, and so each of them had to undertake ejection seat training and were actually banged out of RAE's ejection seat trainer device. They were strapped into an ejector seat in a hangar and then ejected. The G forces on initiation of the ejection sequence was in the region of 12 to 14 Gs. But there have been some cases when a pilot experienced 20 Gs at high-speed ejection. The team's main parachutes were GQ 236 7-cell units, which had a glide angle of 3 to 1 and a forward speed of 15 knots. It was hoped that it would put the parachutists between 1,500 and 2,000 feet above the French coast, with a flight time under canopy estimated at approximately 25 minutes. The reserve parachutes were 26-foot security low-pull reserves. The pack and harnesses were TSE Jetstreams, and the AODs were Irvine height finders fitted to the reserve to fire at 5,000 feet ASL above sea level. They wore life jackets, which were the Mark 14 life jackets, and the headgear was RAF pilots' headgear, including the oxygen attachment and intercom systems. Their equipment was good, but the only concern that the team had was that their gloves, which was used to keep their fingers warm, would somehow hinder the emergency operation. This was yet to be seen. Their mission was to cross the English Channel on the parachute with a departure point at flight level 250 above the DVR VOR, that's the Dover VOR, and to be inserted onto the French coast somewhere southwest of Calais. Considering the length of training they went through, they had no standby plan, and every team member knew that if he had a cutaway, he would end up in the Channel, would have to swim through the shipping lanes to reach the French coast, as no rescue helicopter was arranged. On 30th May 1980, the team received a letter from 10 Downing Street, London, on behalf of the Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, wishing them every success for the crossing. Perhaps deep down, she wanted to test just how good our military was in inserting into foreign lands without being detected. Bob Walters now had a problem with the RAF, as they refused to let him have a Hercules aircraft, and after a chuckle from their pilots, they told Bob that they were all going to die, as they already had one of their parachutes blow up at flight level 150. So Wally and the hooligans were planning on jumping from flight level 250, which was certainly a problem for the RAF. Hence, they refused to provide an aircraft. Wally, using his skills, managed to talk to Peter Bartlett, the owner and pilot of Piper Navajo, Golf Bravo Foxtrot Hotel Oscar, and assisted by co-pilot Chris Cosgrove, flew them to flight level 250 along the edge of the southern eastern coast of England. Now, the pilot of the Navajo had a further problem, as that aircraft had never been up so high before and never had a ceiling of 26,300 feet, putting the aircraft very close to Coffin's Corner. Coffin's Corner in the aviation world means the point at which the flight envelope boundary defined by the high incidence stall intersects that defined by the critical Mach number, in other words Mach crit. So, if you are quite close to losing control of the aircraft and it going into a stall, that really is what Mach crit is about. The further problem that the Navajo had was that the aircraft was not pressurized and neither did it have onboard oxygen. But our mate Wally charmed his way again and managed to get the Institute of Aviation Medicine not only to design, but also build an 8-place oxygen console for him and his band of brothers. The team did 2 training jumps from 12,000 feet over Lydd in Kent, and on those jumps Sergeant Wally Walters' wind-up movie camera froze. Hence he made a decision to abandon it and not take it on the actual record. Wally at the time was the only cameraman for the team. The targeted airfield for the actual jump was also Lydd in Kent, with the exit point being over the DOVR at flight level 250 for their departure into France. On Sunday, 31st August, the weather was favourable, and so at 0548 hours, the aircraft was overhead the beach and level with the golf course at St. Margaret's. The jumpmaster, Ted Lewington, with thumbs up, exited the aircraft, followed by other members spaced out at 6-second delays. They exited the aircraft at 24,000 feet, with all of them experiencing positive openings, abolishing the myth that the openings would be slow. The French coast seemed a long, long way away. Now reality sunk in. Would they make it or not? Wally Walters looked down and saw a car ferry and made up his mind that if he was not sure of making the French coast, he would head for the ferry. At 16,000 feet, they hoped and prayed that the height finder pins were back in place to avoid a possible reserve deployment. At 10,000 feet, all was looking good, and the press aircraft were able to locate the parachutists who by now had dispensed with their oxygen masks. The French coast was crossed between 9,000 and 3,000 feet, but the winds were howling, and although they turned the canopies into wind, they were still being blown backwards at an incredible speed. Each of them, prepared for landing on the beach, suddenly disappeared, but they had achieved the record as distance had been travelled. Now their only concern was for a safe landing. On landing, they cut away their main canopies in case there was a sudden gust of wind. With the French soil under their feet, they now had a record firmly under their belts. Now started the daunting task of escaping French captivity. A local farmer saw some parachutists land on French soil, and although World War II had long passed, reported the invasion to the local police, who arrived and carted some of them off to the Nick. Fortunately for them, an aircraft carrying crates of Courage Ale arrived at Calais Airport, and large amounts of this refined English ale was poured down the throats of the captors, the local police. The escapees then boarded the Navajo, which had landed at Calais, and after God bless and good wishes from their merry captors, flew back onto British soil and into fame, from not only the media, but also from the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. Meanwhile, the enterprising RAF pilots who flew the Wessex helicopter for the rescue mission and managed to rescue a few of them before the French cops arrived were hauled in front of a board of inquiry as they did not have official permission to take one of Her Majesty's aircraft to a foreign land for a rescue mission. Their sentence remains a secret to this very day.